So thank you, Rachel, for introducing me. I will be presenting why it makes sense for businesses of all sizes and sectors to act on the climate emergency and why now is the right time to do it. So what we see is that businesses are under increasing pressure. We see that there are increasing constraints coming from laws, regulations, strategies, initiatives, etc., at all levels. And this is not new. The Paris Agreement to limit temperature increase globally to 1.5 degrees or well below 2 degrees was signed back in 2016. The ESOS Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme has been in place since 2015. The UK Climate Change Act was passed in November 2008 and stating that emission reductions targets that the UK must comply with legally. So all of this is not new, and just what we see is that the legal context is increasingly constraining and complicated to navigate for businesses, and I would say especially smaller ones. The two latest reporting initiatives are the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting, so SECR, and this is to measure how businesses impact climate, and the TCFD, so the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which aims to measure how climate is or will impact businesses. So these are the two latest ones that businesses will have to take into account and will make them address climate. And finally, the pressure also comes from investors and shareholders, as we see businesses not taking climate into account or having too big an impact on climate, losing financial value. So businesses are under increasing pressure, and they are also under increasing scrutiny from the public eye. And 2019 was really the year that changed everything on that front, thanks to Extinction Rebellion, thanks to the various youth activists and climate strikes that were happening all around the world. And now we can say that businesses are very much expected to play their part, probably more than governments and individuals. So on the box, in the box on the left-hand side here, I've just had a bit of fun really, and these are the headlines that arrived in my inbox in only 5 days. So that was probably 2 weeks ago. And so as we can see, we are bombarded by news of companies taking action and really setting ambitious targets. So the giants of this world like IBM or the banks are taking action, but we're also seeing some more unexpected sectors, I would say, like oil and gas or aviation, taking commitment. And what we know is that when multinationals like this set ambitious targets, all their supply chain is impacted and is expected to reduce its impact as well on climate. So SMEs all around the world and in Northern Ireland, of course, will be impacted by those ambitious targets that these companies are taking. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that there is a multiplication of initiatives to challenges and support businesses to set targets to reduce their emissions, again, at all levels, be it nationally or globally. So the science-based targets, the race to zero, the business ambition for 1.5 degrees, all of these initiatives, and of course, the business action on climate that I will be presenting later, all of these initiatives are designed to challenge and support businesses to address the climate emergency. So businesses are under pressure, they are under public scrutiny, but beyond that, what are the hard facts and the impacts they are already seeing from the climate breakdown? So I'm sorry in advance because this is a bit the grim part and the bad news. So temperatures are rising, and some people might say, well, look, this might be a good thing for Northern Ireland, actually, well, although we are seeing spring is coming. But what we are seeing is that temperature rise globally not only means milder winters, but also a series of environmental events and impacts that will be happening more and more frequently. So if we look at extreme heat, 20 of the warmest years on record have been in the last 22 years. The past 4 have been the warmest ever globally. Global temperature increase means more drought, means more soil infertility, means ocean acidification, means more flooding. So if we look at flooding only, it has quadrupled since 1980 and doubled since 2004. So it is now estimated that New York City will suffer 500-year floods every 25 years. An global increase in temperature also means rising sea levels, fires. Well, we all remember 2020 for COVID, but early in 2020 there were also all the fires in Australia. So that's very, very recent. It means more frequent superstorms and hurricanes. So the climate change will significantly increase the scale and frequency, the duration, the timing, the coverage, the intensity of these extreme events. And an increase in temperature also means a reduced nutritional value of crops and a biodiversity mass extinction. So some of those are happening and will be happening all around the world, but we are also already seeing some of those happen in Northern Ireland. And sorry again for the bit depressing part. So in 2017, Derry City and Strabane floods, there was a rainfall of 60 to 70 millimeters in 9 hours, and the water rose to unprecedented levels, which washed away bridges and caused hundreds of homes to flood, causing also damages to roads and closed the airports. In 2014, there were some high tidal surges and heavy rain that caused coastal flooding in and around Ards. It is expected that sea levels in Northern Ireland will rise at least 11 centimeters by 2100. And unless global emissions decline, this could be up to 94 centimeters. So I want you all to imagine what almost 1 meter rise in sea levels mean for all those houses and all this infrastructure that is close to the seashore. In 2017, we saw Storm Ophelia with gusts of 70 miles per hour of wind, and this caused, amongst other, a loss of electricity in 8,000 homes. And finally, we all remember 2020 as the sunniest spring on record. We were all stuck at home, so that was actually a good thing for most of us. But in June 2020, Northern Irish farmers were facing the worst drought-type conditions since 1976. So yes, sun is great, but not for everyone, and not in all circumstances. And just all of these facts come from Climate NI, who have a great database of extreme events in Northern Ireland. So all these environmental events have also an impact that is human and is on businesses and for the employees, for the way businesses operate. So if I start with the most obvious one, is probably damage to property and infrastructure as a direct impact of floods, extreme weather events, rise in sea levels. So if we look again at the 2017 floods in Derry City and Strabane, they are estimated to have cost the regional government over £12 million. If we look at heat exhaustions, this is a real risk, again, for the whole of the country and Northern Ireland itself as well. In the UK, heat-related deaths could reach 7,500 per year by 2050. So that's a real risk. And then the question becomes, what do businesses do to make sure that their employees are comfortable and safe when they go to work? A lack of security of food and water supply, again, we can easily imagine how that can affect the supply chains of the businesses that are operating in Northern Ireland. And there are also some secondary or indirect impacts to all of this, like political instability and conflict and mass migration. The UN estimates that 200 million people could be forced into migration by 2050 due to climate change. So just to give you a point of reference, the recent Syrian refugee crisis, that was about 1 million people displaced. So we could see 200 crises of that size only due to climate change. So businesses of all sizes will be directly or indirectly impacted by all those environmental and human impacts of climate breakdown. But I want to end on a more positive note, maybe. And it's just to say that addressing this challenge and addressing this crisis is an amazing business opportunity. So here, what we have is the pathway for the UK to reach net zero by 2050. This was published by the Committee on Climate Change as part of the 6th carbon budget back in December. And what we see is that action is required to reach net zero by 2050 across 4 key areas. So the first one is reducing demand for carbon-intensive activities. So that means reducing demand, a shift in diets, a reduction in waste, less travel, but also an improved efficiency, a better insulation of buildings, but improved efficiency in our vehicles, in our industry. So here we can already see the business opportunity that exists. And this part, reducing demand for carbon-intensive activities, is the bit in purple, the two purple strands in the graph. Then we have take-up of low-carbon solutions. So again, how do we have low-carbon cars, low-carbon vans, boilers, heavy goods vehicle, all of those that could emit less greenhouse gases. And this is the biggest chunk of the journey that is required, and that's the orange, red, and yellow bit in the graph. The third area where we need to act is an expansion of low carbon energy supply. So we already have 47% of our energy that comes from renewable sources in Northern Ireland, but we could also have low carbon electricity even further, and the uptake of low carbon hydrogen. So that's the bit in blue. And finally, there is a huge opportunity, and this is probably even more true here in Northern Ireland, where we have a rural setting with a big agri sector, is how do we transform our land? And how do we make sure that the way our land and our farms operate actually captures carbon? So that's how do we implement low carbon farming practices? How do we implement nature-based removals of carbon through woodlands, peatlands, and wetlands? So hopefully, I hope that this gives some ideas to businesses as to what the opportunities are here, but Sam will be talking more about this later on. To sum it up, I just want to say, don't waste a good crisis. COVID was a fine one. Climate is an even bigger one, sorry. So as with all crises, there are risks and there are opportunities. And it's important that businesses of all sizes, again, and of all sectors, start to include those risks and opportunities in their risk management and in their strategic planning. So there are physical risks. Some are acute, like extreme weather events. Some are chronic, like sea levels, heat, etc. There are some transition risks that are linked to policy and the law, technology, market, like changing customer behaviors, for instance, or reputational risks. But there are also amazing opportunities around resource efficiency, around different energy sourcing, new products and services that will be required, new markets that will be opening, and resilience. So hopefully I haven't depressed everyone with my presentation. Thank you, and I will now hand over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Geraldine, for that very interesting presentation. And to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please submit them via the question function for our Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Our next speaker is Sam Knox. Sam is a business development executive for the energy and water sectors in the InvestNI Energy and Resource Efficiency team. As an energy engineer, he has over 40 years' experience in the sector, ranging from the deployment of energy efficiency and renewable technologies to supply chain development for the emerging opportunities associated with water, hydrogen, energy storage, intelligent energy systems, and offshore wind. I will now hand over to Sam to present on the growth opportunities for businesses.